Alright, so for today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to make this tulip flower belt. And so far, I've actually made two versions of it. The first, I did white instead of black, like I did on the second version. And then I also used ribbon as the strap on the first version, and then decided I'd actually like to give a crack at crocheting that instead. So I can't really decide which version I like more. I tend to have more darker colored clothing, so the black I feel fits and matches most of whatever I wear. But the white looks super cute paired with like a white dress or a really floral cardigan, so it really kind of depends on whatever is in your wardrobe as far as what colors to use. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so to get started, we're going to begin with the main color of our belt, so either white or black or really any color that you'd like. And we're going to start by tying a slip knot. So the way I like to tie my slip knots, I like to tie them so that whenever you pull the tail end, it tightens the knot versus when you pull the working end. So the way I like to do that is I'll reserve a long tail and then I'll fold it behind the working yarn and kind of loop it around my fingers. Then I'm going to bring that tail in between my fingers, and then I'm going to pull that tail through that loop, and then by holding the tail and the working yarn, tighten that slip knot down. And I like that slip knot because that leaves me a long tail to weave in, and then it doesn't tighten the slip knot whenever I pull on the working yarn, it only tightens it whenever I pull on the tail. So once you've done that, we're ready to go ahead and get our crochet hook inserted inside of that slip knot and tighten that down by pulling the tail. And then we're going to begin by chaining 60 stitches. Alright, so I have all 60 of my chains made, and then we're going to want to chain one additional stitch to turn our work. So once we've got that extra chain, we're going to start single crocheting, and we're going to go to the third chain from our hook. So we don't ever count the one on our hook, so we're going to skip 1, 2, and then work into that third chain. We're just going to place a single crochet in there. And then I like to mark that first stitch. It's technically that chain that we skipped over. That's the first stitch of the round. So we've just crocheted our second stitch. I'm going to grab a stitch marker and I'm going to slip it through that first stitch of the round. So you can see that's the first stitch there. And I've actually just single crocheted the second. And then I'm going to continue single crocheting in every chain all the way down until I get to the very end of this chain. Alright, so here's my last single crochet stitch for this first row, and it's in the slip knot that we tied. So I'm ready to start my second row, and I'm going to begin by chaining 2 stitches to turn, and then I'll turn my row, and then we're going to begin by placing a single crochet stitch in the second stitch. So not this first one, this chain 2 is going to count as that first single crochet. We're going to single crochet in the second stitch from round 1. And then I also like to mark this stitch as well. So I'll have a stitch marker on one end and then on the other end of my work here. I like to mark that stitch though because I find if I'm working flat and not in the round, I sometimes will drop the stitch at the end of my row because it's kind of hard to tell when it's that chain which is the last stitch. So I like to mark it just to be safe. Okay, so for row 2, we need to put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch from row 1. So 60 single crochet all the way down this row. Alright, I'm at my last single crochet stitch, which I marked from my first round, or my first row. I'm going to go ahead and take that stitch marker out. And then I'm going to do most of my single crochet, but I need to change colors because we're going to make the leaves for the tulips on the next row. So I'm going to go through this next stitch. I'm going to try to catch both sides of that chain as well. And then I'm going to finish this single crochet off in that green color that I'm making my leaves. So I'm going to cut a medium length tail with the white and then get my green yarn started. And I like my tails to be about the same length. So I'm going to hold the green tail, make sure it's the same length as that white, and then finish this stitch off with that green. And then before I go on, since this is a piece of clothing and it's going to get wear and tear, I actually like to tie these two tails together. And we're going to come back through and weave these in. But I find that helps it be a little more secure. I'm not worried about it coming undone while I'm wearing it. Alright, so we're ready for our next row where we're going to be adding the tulip leaves. So first we need to turn our row, and we're going to turn with our new color. So we're going to chain 3 stitches with this green, and then turn our row. And then we're ready to start adding in those bobble stitches for our leaves. So our first stitch, we're going to place a 3 double crochet bobble inside of it. So we're going to yarn over and go through that next stitch of our round. Then we're going to yarn over and draw up a loop, yarn over and draw through 2, and then we're going to repeat that, continuing to stack loops on our hook until we've got 3 mostly finished double crochet stitches inside of this first stitch. So yarn over, go through that same stitch, yarn over and draw up a loop, yarn over and draw through 2, and we'll repeat that one last time. So yarn over, go through that same stitch, yarn over and draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through 2. Then to finish off this bobble stitch, we're going to yarn over and draw through all 4 loops on our hook. And that makes our first bobble stitch. I'm also going to mark the top of that chain 3 that I made in green. I'm going to go through both sides of it as well, just so I can keep track of where that first stitch of the round is. Alright, so now that we have that first bobble stitch, we're ready to start our bobble stitch pattern. So we're going to start by skipping the next 2 stitches, and in that 3rd stitch we're going to place another bobble. So yarn over, skip 1, 2, and then we're going to go through that 3rd stitch, and we're going to make another bobble stitch just like we did. So yarn over and draw through 2, yarn over, go through the loop, yarn over and draw up a loop, yarn over and draw through 2. We'll do that one more time. Then when we have all 3 of those mostly finished double crochets, we'll yarn over and draw through all the loops on our hook. And then we're going to chain 1. And in that same space this first bobble stitch is in, we're going to place another bobble stitch. So it's another double crochet, 3 double crochet bobble. We'll yarn over and draw through all of those loops. And that is one complete repetition of our pattern. So we'll start the next cluster. So these are our little leaves here, and the flower is going to go in between the 2 of them. We'll start our next cluster the same way we started this one, by yarning over and then skipping 2 stitches, and then starting our next cluster in that 3rd stitch. So I'm going to continue this pattern until I get a little closer to the end of this row. So I will see you back here whenever I have gotten closer to wrapping up row 3's bobble stitches. Alright, so I have 4 stitches left here on my row with the leaves, and I wanted to show how to end this row. So 4 stitches means I still need to do 1 more of these leaf clusters, and that's going to be in the second to last stitch of my row. This is why I also really like to mark the first and last stitch, because sometimes it's hard to see where that is, and if you can't find it, you'll lose a stitch, and it's just a mess. But let's go ahead and add that last cluster in the second to last stitch here. So there's that last leaf cluster. And to finish off this row, all we need to do is put a double crochet stitch in the last stitch of the row. And then we also need to do a color change, so we're going to finish off the double crochet stitch in the color of the tulips that we're going to be switching to. So let's go ahead and add most of that double crochet stitch. So here's most of it done for me. I'm going to pull through those last 2 loops in the color that I'm going to be using for my tulips. So let me cut the green yarn. And I'm going to be making my tulips in this sort of pastel blue color. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I did with the green tail, I'm going to make it so that the blue is about the same length as the green. And then I'm going to pull that last loop through to start this row with blue. And then just like I did before, I'm going to tie the green and the blue tails together. Okay, so we're ready to begin on the tulip flower round here. And we're going to start by chaining 3 stitches, which acts as our first stitch. And then we're going to turn our row. And then we're going to be working popcorn stitches in the spaces between our leaf clusters. So anytime we chained one, we're going to be working in that space. So our first stitch is going to be in the space between that first leaf cluster. And to make our popcorn stitch, we're going to yarn over, go through that same space, so that chain 1 space. We're not going to go in the chain 1, but just in the space itself. Yarn over and draw up a loop. Yarn over and draw through 2, yarn over and draw through 2. So a regular double crochet stitch. We're going to make 4 more of these for a total of 5 double crochet stitches, all in that same space. So there's all 5 of my double crochet stitches. And to make the popcorn, we're going to take our hook out of the loop that it's in, and then we're going to insert from back to front through the first double crochet that we have. Remember, not that chain 3 we made to turn. We're going to mark that in just a second, but that first double crochet that we made. Then we're going to grab the loop that we took our hook out of and pull it through the stitch, that first double crochet stitch. And that makes the popcorn pop towards the back, but that's actually the front of our belt. Then to finish off this stitch, we're going to chain 3 stitches. I'm also going to take this time to mark that first chain 3 that we made, so I don't drop that stitch accidentally. So I'm just going to mark that. And then I'm ready to make my next popcorn stitch in the space between the next 2 leaf clusters. There's my 5 double crochet stitches. I'm going to go from back to front through that first double crochet, grab my loop that I pulled off my hook and draw it through, and then chain 3. So we're going to repeat this same pattern of 5 double crochet popcorn, chain 3, until we get closer to the end of our row. So I will see you back here whenever I'm getting close to wrapping up this row. Alright, so I have worked almost this entire row of popcorn stitches, and I've chained 3 after my last popcorn that I just made. And all I have left for this row is the one lonely popcorn stitch we made, so the one that doesn't have a cluster. We're going to place our next popcorn at the top of that popcorn stitch. So it's sort of like you're skipping 1 and then putting your popcorn stitch into the second to last stitch of the row. Alright, so there's my last popcorn stitch, but we're not going to chain 3 after this one. We're going to just add 1 last double crochet in the last stitch of our row. And then we're going to finish off that double crochet with the main color of our belt. So for me, I'm going to finish this double crochet stitch off in white. So I'm going to cut the tulip color, blue in my case, and then switch back to the main belt color, which is white for me. I'm going to pull that last double crochet through with white. And then just like before, I'm going to tie those two tails together. And then I'm ready to turn my row, and we're going to turn the row by chaining 2 stitches. And when we flip our work over, you can see the popcorn stitches are the tulip flowers. They kind of pop out this direction. Alright, so for round 5, for row 5, we're going to start by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the top of the first popcorn. So let's talk about these popcorn stitches. What is technically the top of the popcorn stitch? I consider the top of the popcorn stitch the stitch that the chain comes out of. So you can see there's these chain 3 here. This is the top of the popcorn stitch for me. So I'm going to place that first single crochet stitch right here. So not in the chain that I made, but through the top of the stitch there. And then I'm going to mark that first chain, the chain 2 that we made to turn the row, like I have been this entire time. And then for this first chain 3 space between our first 2 popcorn stitches, we're going to add 3 single crochet stitches. So we're working just in the space, not through the chains themselves, just in the space underneath. Then we're going to place 1 single crochet stitch in the top of the popcorn. And then we're going to start our repeating pattern that we're going to repeat until basically the end of the row, which is to put 2 single crochet stitches in that chain 2 space, and then 1 single crochet stitch at the top of the next popcorn. And we're going to repeat that. It's 2 single crochet, 1 single crochet top of the popcorn stitch, until we are basically at the end of our row. So I will get back to you whenever I get to my second to last popcorn stitch on this row, because we need to do something just a little bit different to finish the row off. Alright, so I've reached my last chain 3 space. So we need to do something a little bit different in this last chain 3 space. Sort of like what we did with the first chain 3 space. We're going to add 3 single crochet to this space. Then we'll put 1 single crochet stitch at the top of the last popcorn, and then 1 single crochet stitch in the last stitch of the row, which is marked for me. So I'm going to try to go through both sides of that chain as well. Alright, and that wraps up this row. So we're ready to start our next row. We'll begin by chaining 2 and then turning our work. And then we're going to add 1 single crochet stitch to every stitch in this row. I'm going to mark that first chain 2 because it's my first stitch. So we're going to continue single crocheting in every stitch for this row. I'll see you back here whenever I get close to the end of the row. Alright, I am just about to finish this row of single crochet stitches. I've got one more left. Alright, so next up we're going to add that border, the picot stitches, to the top of our belt here. So we're going to start by chaining 2 to turn, and then turn our work. Then we're going to add our first single crochet stitch in the second stitch of this row. I'm going to once again mark that chain 2. Then I'm going to add 1 more single crochet stitch. And then I'm going to make my first picot stitch. So this is a chain 3 picot. So we're going to chain 3 stitches. And then we're going to slip stitch to the first chain 3 that we made, and I usually only slip stitch through the one side of the chain, so just this side closest to me. So I'm going to go through just that loop there and slip stitch. You can see that adds this little sort of like a frill here at the edge, And then we're going to make 3 more single crochet stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and then we'll add our next picot. So chain 3, slip stitch at the bottom of that chain. We're going to continue that pattern of 3 single crochet stitches and then 1 chain 3 picot stitch until we are at the end of this row. So I'll see you back here whenever I'm getting close to wrapping up this row. Alright, so I've just added my last picot stitch and I have 2 stitches left for the top of the belt here. So I'm going to go ahead and single crochet in both of those stitches. And then I'm going to chain 2 stitches and we're going to turn the row, but we're going to turn it this way and work down the side of the belt. We're also going to add the tightening strap to this side as we go. So we've got that chain 2. So we're going to place a single crochet stitch basically in the same space that that chain 2 is coming out of. So the stitch that we worked in, the last one from that last row that we did along the top, we're going to go through that same space and add a single crochet. You can see that chain 2 makes the corner square. And then we're going to work in the next couple of stitches along the side here. So I'm going to work through this next white chain, adding a single crochet stitch. I'm going to work through this next blue chain. And then in this blue where it kind of turns from blue to green, I'll put 1 more single crochet stitch. And then we're ready to add the belt strap. So depending on how large or how small you want your belt, you can chain more or less stitches to make the belt. So my general rule of thumb is however long this 60 single crochet belt ends up being along the front of you, for me it takes up about the first front half of my body. It wraps around just a little bit of the back too. So I found that a 60 chain works really well for me. It gives me a lot of extra space to tie a little bow in the back, which I think is very cute. But if you're smaller than me, and you might be, you may need to chain less. And if you're larger than me, which you might be, people come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, you may need to chain more. So if you are chaining, I would just check by holding the belt up in front of you and seeing how far around the chain wraps around you. You want to make sure you have a little bit of extra so you can tie it. But then also take into account that crochet is a little stretchy, so you may not need to chain as much as you think. I'm going to go ahead and just chain my standard 60 chains. Alright, so I've got my 60 chains made, and before I begin working back down the chain, I'm going to double check that it hasn't twisted at any point. So I usually start where the chain meets the belt and sort of go along, making sure it's not twisted at any point. And mine was, so I'm glad I double checked. And then we're ready to begin working back down this chain. So I've chained 60, I'm going to chain 1 more so I can turn. And then in the second chain from my hook, and of course never counting the loop on the hook, I'm going to slip stitch. And then I'm going to continue slip stitching down this chain until I get closer to the belt. Alright, so I just worked in the last chain and added that last slip stitch. So I'm ready to continue working on the side of the belt. So I'm going to place the next single crochet stitch in that chain from the top of the leaf row that we made. So go through and single crochet. And that attaches the belt strap securely to the side of the belt. I'm going to continue working down this side of the belt, going into the bottom of that chain we made for the leaves. Then I'm going to go through the side of the chain 2 we made from the white. Here's that next chain from the white. And then this here is actually the slip knot that we tied. So I'm going to go through that. which takes me to the bottom of the side of the belt. So next we're going to chain 2 stitches, and just like we did when we swung around this corner, we're going to do the same thing here. We'll place the next single crochet stitch in that same stitch, that slip knot that we went through already. And that counts as our first stitch of the round. And then I'm going to pull that slip knot tail tightly and weave it in as I continue working the bottom of the belt. So we'll make 1 single crochet and then that 3rd single crochet. And we'll start that picot pattern back up. So chain 3, slip stitch the bottom of that chain 3, and then continue working along the bottom of the belt, adding that picot pattern, working in that slip knot tail. So I'll see you back here whenever we're ready to flip the other side of the belt and make the other strap. Alright, so I've reached the bottom of the belt, the very corner here, and you can see I've finished that picot pattern. So we're going to turn the corner just like we did last time by chaining 2 stitches. Then we're going to put our first single crochet in the same stitch that that last single crochet is in. Then we're going to add single crochet stitches to the chains on the ends of these rows. So here's my first in the green of the leaves. So then I'm ready to go ahead and add the strap on this side. So however how many you made for the strap on the other side, I would do that exact same amount for this side. So I'm going to chain 60 and slip stitch back down that chain. So I'll see you back here and we'll finish off the end of the belt together. Alright, so I just finished slip stitching down that chain 60 that I made for the other strap, and I'm ready to finish off the side of the belt. So I'm going to go ahead and single crochet in that stitch where my blue and green meet together, so the tulips and the leaves. And that secures this strap onto the side of the belt. Then we're going to continue single crocheting in those chains that we made to turn our rows. So here are all the blue ones. And then I'm in the white now for those single crochet rows. And then here's my last stitch, which you can see I've actually still got marked. So I'm going to take that stitch marker out. And I'm going to single crochet in that stitch. Which takes us all the way around and is actually the last stitch we need to make. So let's go ahead and fasten off and get some of these ends weaved in. So I'm going to cut a medium length tail with this white, and then I'm going to pull this white through the last stitch, sort of like a chain, but I'm going to pull all the way through and then tighten that down into a knot. And then if you flip your belt over, you can see we have some of these tails that we need to weave in. And the reason I don't like to crochet weave them in is because I find as we wear the belt, it'll sort of stretch this area here, and then these will all come unwoven if they're just crochet woven in. So I like to take a needle and actually weave them in. So there are all those tails woven in, so I can go ahead and cut these. So then let's also weave in the tail that we used to fasten off. And then we also need to weave in the tails here on this side. Alright, so once you've got those tails woven in, your belt is complete. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope that you love the belt that you made and get a lot of use out of it for this spring. I would be absolutely delighted if you'd consider giving my channel a subscription. A subscription tells me that you like what I do and you would like to see more. So, as always, thank you so much for watching.